Hi, everybody. Eric Dorward here with our hopefully final installment of building the Estes Black Brant 12. Now, painting's done. Painting went reasonably well, I guess. The worst thing that happened was when I used my masking tape, I pulled off a bit of the primer on this fin, well, on these two, the ones that are different colored. That's unrelated. They're supposed to be different colors, but finish is not super great there. Everywhere else, reasonably pleased. So the last thing we need to do is some final construction. So we're going to need all these things eventually. Let's get this stuff out of here for the moment. First thing we need to do is install the engine retention system, and that's going to go on the back like this. And for the most part, I found that the instructions say to epoxy this in place. I think that's probably on the unnecessary side there. That's what it's supposed to look like. I'm just going to use a bit of crazy glue, which we've got here. That would be our good friend CA glue. I'm going to apply some on the interior here, or at least I'm going to try to. Apparently my glue is on the clogged side of things. This happens with some regularity, especially as the glue gets older. When that happens, your best bet is to get yourself a paper clip and use that to clear things out. So I'm just going to kind of punch a hole in through the hole that's supposed to be there with a paper clip, and hopefully that'll resolve matters. All right. Okay. Let's try it again. Oh yeah, there we go. Now things are flowing. I am putting crazy glue on the interior of this because that's probably the easiest way to do it. Remember, this is going to set up really quickly. So line it up, put it in place, and you are good to go. Now I can see I've got some excess there. This has actually been somewhat problematic on a few of these that I've built recently. If you end up with drips that squish out the top and they harden, well, you can end up making like a little puddle, and then the motor won't fit in properly. So you have to end up chopping it out with a hobby knife. So to avoid that problem, I have just dabbed it off. So hopefully that will be fine. So that takes care of the engine retention system. This part, when in use, will screw on the top, and that'll hold the motor in. By the way, these motors are 29 millimeters. Remember, we didn't put an engine block in there. So in order to use one, I don't have one right here, but essentially, then this is bigger. You end up putting a little band of masking tape around the outside of this, like 3 layers thick. Very thin, like maybe a quarter of an inch on the high side. And when you put it in, that'll actually stop it surprisingly well. It's also worth noting, too, that this size rocket, you should be able to fly off 24 millimeter motors, provided that you have a 29 to 24 adapter, which I've used to fly other Estes rockets on an E12 rather than an E16, because they are much more affordable and they're easier to find. 24 millimeter Estes kits than 29s. All right, so that should be fine. The next thing we need to do is, here is the part of the shock cord. Previously, I hadn't tied a knot into this, but this is going to be how this connects to this, which is our elastic band, and that is going to be the other part of the shock cord. So I'm going to tie a knot in this. Let's try it 3 times. Hopefully that'll be plenty. This is very thick elastic, especially compared to the typical smaller ones that are just a piece of exposed plastic. This seems to have some nylon or some other kind of fabric on it. All right, the knot I tied here is essentially a slip knot, so I'm going to kind of tighten it down here. There we go. One other thing that I'm going to do with this is I'm going to put a dot of CA glue on it to kind of lock things down here. There we go. just so my slip knot won't decide to slip anytime soon. All right, now the other end of this attaches to this part right here, which this is where the body part comes apart. But before I do that, this needs to be attached to the upper part of the rocket. Now, let's get that out of the way. So here's the upper part of the rocket. It's still in two pieces. This part and this part go together like so. And there we go. And the, wait, sorry, that's upside down. That's how it goes together. You know, I was missing something. And these two bits should be lined up with each other, and you can do that by visual, eyeballing it. However, this is not to be glued together until everything is finalized. So I'm not even going to do this, at least in this video. There might be like a little add-on, maybe, depending on how things go. But it is possible that we need to put extra weight in here in the nose cone if the center of gravity and center of pressure don't match up well. Now, there are very explicit instructions in the instructions on how to do this. So that might require an extra video. But for the time being, I'm going to remove this, just to get it out of the way. And then this needs to be installed a little closer. Something. There we go. Like this. Now, I want to make sure that I am following the instructions to the letter here. There we go. There's a little diagram of what this is supposed to look like. It looks like so this part right here is supposed to go kind of midway, although a little bit closer to the fin. And if you look down the barrel of things, let's see right here, the little wood bump outs are supposed to be almost in line, just to kind of like at the edge of the fins. And I'll look at things. I think this is probably about as centered as I want it to get. It looks fine. So the instructions again call for epoxy. I am going to take a little bit of a risk here and go with CA again. I'm going to put the CA fairly far, about as far as I can get the nozzle here inside. Again, do you need epoxy? Well, you can't use wood glue because it's plastic on a cardboard, so that's not an option. But I think epoxy is probably overkill. And the number one thing you want to do here is to get it lined up properly beforehand, and I'm pretty confident in myself that I can do that before I get the plastic and the everything all set up. So that's about how I want it. I'm going to push it in quickly, check alignment very rapidly, and that looks fine. This is, there are not going to be a lot of forces trying to pull this apart, so I'm not too worried about that. And when I make the final gluing attachments with the upper part, that should be fine to do with CA glue rather than epoxy as well. Although again, the instructions call for this to be epoxied. All right, so this is kind of like in timeout zone over here. The last thing I'm going to do, and you really do need to do this before you do the weight test, is finally attach everything. So I need to attach the parachute. I need to connect the two bits with the shock cord. I don't think it really matters which is first, but I think I'll do the parachute. This is a nice nylon parachute. It's quite large, actually. What is this? It's 24? It's about 24. So nice and big. The only kind of oddity about a parachute like this compared to what you may be used to if you're dealing with plastic is so many cords. Let's get this out of here. There we go. Anyway, the only difference is the way that they're sewed together. So the normal Estes plastic ones have 3 shrouds, and 2 of them are at the edges and 1 goes across the middle. Well, this one has, it looks like 8. and none of them go across the middle. So kind of the downside to this is that your shroud lines are going to be inherently somewhat tangled just because they have to be. You're going to have to cross over at some point, so there is going to be something that is slightly tangled. The other thing is these shroud lines are too thick for me to use the barrel swivels that I have, which I typically use to minimize the spin on this. So I'm just going to have to do the old usual business of threading this through the eyelet. There we go. And then all of this stuff needs to get, there we go. All this is going to get pulled through like so and knotted down that way. Yeah, this will make it a little bit more likely that things will tangle while the rocket is descending, but we can live with that. If you really don't like that prospect, well, then buy some really big barrel swivels would be my recommendation. I mean, they certainly exist. I just don't have any. I've tried to thread, well, I don't think it was a 24. I think it was a shoot of similar proportions to this, but not quite as big. Actually, I think I want this out to the side. And I did it, but it was so, the shroud lines were so thick through the barrel that it didn't really work properly anyway. All right, so that's taken care of. So now I need to tie the elastic cord. So that goes through. And again, let's go with 3 knots. And that should be more than enough. Oops. Should I do this kind of upright so I can see what I'm doing better, but then you wouldn't be able to see it. Okay. All right, there we go. I'm going to kind of adjust this down like this so that the shroud and the elastic cord, they're kind of offset to each other so they shouldn't interact as much. All right, so this is basically assembled. There are, as I mentioned, we need to do a weight test, which it's not going to happen in this video. The only other thing that's worth mentioning is this set came with these decals. They are not part of the actual styling of the rocket. So do you want to put them on? I mean, you have them, so you could, and if you want, I mean, Estes did design this, so maybe you want to give credit where credit's due, but honestly, I mean, am I going to put them on? Probably not. They're not, I don't think they really add much. I might. If the spirit moves me, maybe I will put them on, but I don't, there's not like a place in the instructions that say where to put it. So I'm not going to get too bent out of shape about that. All right, anyway, I've been rolling up the chute here in order to pack it. I do need to pack it to check the weight distribution. And, it'd be nice to have this thing basically put away anyway. The other thing that is worth mentioning too is I usually, certainly when I have decals on my rockets, I like to give the rocket a final clear coat of spray paint. But I am rather, I don't really like doing that when I have metallic paint on my rocket. That would be the silver on this thing. So here in the other transition that you can't quite see because I'm fooling around with it. I don't really like that because I could show you, although I really don't want to because it's kind of embarrassing, a rocket that I painted silver and then I used, so it was actually gold. I painted it gold and then applied the clear coat, and the clear coat just melted the thing. The gold spray paint just kind of liquefied. It was all set. It had been on for a couple days, but it just oozed all the way down. It was very depressing. So I tend not to spray paint anything metallic or clear coat on anything metallic just out of fear that kind of thing might happen again. Speaking of fear, my knot seems to be not in the right place. So I'm going to have to adjust this, because otherwise I am not going to be able to pack it properly. Yeah, that was an interesting surprise. Probably should have done this the other way around, with the shock cord off to the side and the parachute down to the bottom. But that shouldn't make much of a difference. All right. Is that better? All right. It's still kind of sticking out there. You just got to be careful with it. It's going to be kind of a snug fit between the shock cord and the shroud lines. All right, there we go. So, finished product. I wish I could show it to you, but it's really tall. So, there we go. Yeah, and a little bit more, and it goes on like that. Oh, there's the top. And of course, that's not attached yet. All right, so thanks for watching. Potentially one more video just to deal with the weight balance, but otherwise, if not, thanks for watching. We'll see you in whatever comes next. Bye-bye.